He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney.
And this is
The Musical Innertube.
Now, you may ask, why is this podcast called The Musical Innertube?
And we may reply, because that's its name, of course.
Now, how did this podcast get that name?
Back in college, we hosted a radio show. Once, we tried to introduce a soothing musical interlude.
Instead, we messed up and wound up introducing a soothing musical innertube, and the name stuck.
So here we are, hundreds of years later, still talking
to interesting people about their interesting lives.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
Baseball is back with spring training well underway, but the game's going to have a new look in 2023. Pitchers and batters will both operate under a time clock, and infielders will be able to shift out of their positions on the field and set up differently for right or left-handed batters. Now, baseball is playing all spring training games under these new rules to get players used to the changes. And to find out how it's going, we're talking with Scott Lauber. He's a reporter who covers the Philadelphia Phillies for John's old stomping grounds, the Inquirer newspaper. This is Scott's second go-round covering the Phillies. Between the first and second round, he covered another one of our favorite teams, the Boston Red Sox, for the Boston Herald newspaper and ESPN. Scott, welcome to the Musical Innertube.
Thanks for having me, Don and John. Good to be here.
You bet.
Let's talk about these rule changes for a second. The players have had, I guess, maybe about 2 weeks now to play with them in effect for all the games. Is it making a big difference in any of those games?
Yeah, it is. So the biggest one is obviously the pitch clock. If you've caught any of the games on television so far, I think you'll notice the games have been a lot shorter. For one thing, the days of 3-hour games or 3.5-hour games seem to be long gone. And really what Major League Baseball has done is cut out the dead time. They've cut out some of the time that the batters spend walking around the plate, adjusting their batting gloves, doing various things, the pitchers stepping off and tying their shoelaces and doing other things to stall. They've cut out a lot of that. They've put the clock in. The pitchers have 15 seconds to deliver a pitch with nobody on base, 20 seconds with a runner on base, and the batters have to be in the box ready by 8 seconds. So what that has done, like I said, is cut out a lot of that dead time, that waiting around time, and we're seeing a difference in terms of time of game and pace of game. And, I've been down here for probably all but 2 or 3 of the Phillies spring training games so far. And I've only seen one game that's been 3 hours long, and there were like 18 runs scored in the game. So the average game times have been between 2:20 and 2:40 or thereabouts. And so it's definitely noticeable for sure that they've picked up the pace.
Did you like it? Did you like the quicker game?
Well, John, you're talking to a reporter who has deadlines, so I love it. I absolutely love it. But no, I do think it's a better product this way. Baseball, I've felt for a long time. I've covered the game for almost 20 years, and I felt like baseball asks a lot of its consumers. You ask fans to give you 3+ hours a game for 5 or 6 or sometimes 7 days a week or nights a week. That's a big commitment to make, and you're asking fans to give a lot of their time. It's not the NFL. It's not 3 hours once a week. It's not even the NBA or NHL where they play, 3 games a week in a busy week. It's every day. And so in order to, I think, make it a little bit less of, baseball to me has always been kind of a sport that you sort of pick up and take with you. In the summertime, you take it to the beach and listen on the radio, or you take it in the car with you wherever you're going. I think, for those fans, though, who like to sit there and watch the games, I think this is going to be a much better experience. The game still does not, there's a clock in baseball now, which I think is what the traditionalists or the purists have a hard time with. But the game is still not played, this game can still last a while. You can still go extra innings. You still don't have, a clock that where it expires and the game's over. This is just, as I said, between pitches to cut out some of the idle time and speed things up. And, look, players have commented to me like, it's fast. The clock is fast. We have to get used to it. Some of them are not thrilled by it. They'll get used to it. And the guys who've been in the minor leagues who've been used to it now for a couple of years barely notice it anymore. And it's going to get that way in the major leagues too. You'll barely notice it. And, the games will be over in 2.5 hours, and you can kind of, move on to other things. And this day and age, right? I mean, to ask somebody to give you even 2.5 hours, 6 or 7 nights a week, that's a lot. And I think where baseball can make it a little bit easier on the consumer, I think that they should.
So you said the players are on board with it. A lot of the younger players did experience this for the last couple of years in the minor leagues, so they're used to it. But what about a pitcher that likes to take a minute or two to set up in between pitches, and now he has 15 seconds? That I think would be the biggest complaint that I would expect to hear. Are you hearing that?
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say most of the players like it. Not yet, at least. Once they get used to it, I think they'll be fine with it. It's about breaking bad habits, or old habits, I should say. It's about cutting out some of the lollygagging that takes place. And it's just as tough on the hitters, I think, as it is on the pitchers. I've had a lot of hitters tell me, I feel rushed up there. Alec Boehm from the Phillies said, look, I don't know why they're calling it a 15-second clock. You've got to be in the box and ready to hit with 8 seconds to go. He's like, it's really a 7-second clock for the hitters. And so, a lot of hitters have suggested maybe it should be a little more than 15 seconds. Maybe it should be, a little longer than that. It's not going to be longer than that. I don't think baseball is going to bend on this. They want these guys to fall in line, which is one of the reasons why they've instructed the umpires to call the violations in spring training. Like, you're not getting a warning. You're not getting hey, next time we'll get you. No, if you're not in the box and you're not ready, they're calling a strike on you. And if you're a pitcher and you're not ready to deliver the pitch, and as I said, 15 seconds with the bases empty, 20 with a runner on base, you're going to have a ball called. So it's a case where they want to enforce this. They want players to break their old habits as quickly as they can. And once they do, like I said, they will adjust. They will adapt.
If I'm in the on deck circle, let's say that the guy in front of me, dribbles the ball to third base and gets out, when does my clock start to get into the batter's box?
Good question. I think it starts once you reach home plate. And look, honestly, I haven't looked to see exactly when they start the clock. It's not from the second you leave the on deck circle. So
okay,
you don't have to run up there, but once you're there, you got to get in the box and you got to hit. And, so I was watching the game the other day and, talking to a bunch of players afterwards. And, the first time I saw this in practice, a lot of them were saying, a lot of hitters were saying so the pitch will come in, they'll take the pitch or they'll swing through it. And then they would take a step, as if they're going to walk, leave the batter's box. And they realize, oh no, I can't do that anymore. And so already you're seeing that. You're seeing those habits already start to change and form differently. So look, I think in the early going, we're certainly going to hear most about the pitch clock because that's the one that has the most immediate impact. Ultimately, they'll adapt. And I think some of the other new rules that you mentioned, the banning of the shift and things like that, may have a more lasting effect on adding action into the game because they're not only trying to quicken the pace, they're also trying to add more action, less time between balls in play, for example, more athletic plays on the infield, more running of the bases. Baseball over the last 10 or 15 years has gotten away from some of those things that made the game so exciting when, we were younger and we were starting to fall in love with the game. They don't run the bases the way they used to. Contact does not get made as frequently as it used to. It's all about the home run, the strikeout, and the walk. And, everyone loves to see home runs, but I'll tell you, strikeouts and walks, that does not exactly inject action into the game. I like to see hitting and running. I like to see motion on the bases. And so I think that some of the new rules regarding the shift and the larger bases and all of those things will have a longer lasting effect in terms of adding action to the game.
Yeah, because the shift always seemed to me to be sort of cheating in itself, that you could move, if you had a right-handed batter, you could move all of the infielders over to make sure that he didn't pull the ball, and that sort of thing. And I think a couple of batters, I think you had a piece with Kyle Schwarber recently who said, yeah, now maybe some balls can get through the infield and we can get some guys on base because a home run is great when there's people on base. Otherwise, it's just one run. So it's
Right.
it's to their encouragement to get guys running the bases before that home run comes through.
Right, exactly. And, the shift cut both ways. Like, for years, I covered David Ortiz, and people always used to say to David Ortiz, why don't you just, when they shift you, why don't you just hit the ball the other way? And I can't tell you how many times he has said, to me and to others, like, number one, if you think it's just easy to hit the ball the other way, you're crazy. You have no idea what you're talking about. And secondly, that's what they want me to do. Like, the other team wants me to hit a single to left field, or to left field, go the other way, because then I'm only on first base. And if I do that, or if I try to bunt, or if I try to do any of those other things to beat the shift, they win. Like, the way I win is by hitting the ball out of the ballpark. And I'm not going to change who I am or what I do because of the way they play defense. And, that's why teams shifted, and it's why the shift worked. I mean, Kyle Schwarber hit whatever he hit last year, 218 or 213 or something like that. And I saw something somewhere where they estimated that he lost about 12 or 13 hits in the shift, which would have raised his average to close to 240. I mean, the shift worked. Like, it worked. There's a reason why they did it. And, so Schwarber said to me, look, as a left-handed hitter, you'd be foolish to not be excited about this. I'm obviously going to get some hits that were taken away from me, but he also fully expects that there will be teams that try to figure out new ways of playing defense. So, for instance, the shift rules do not apply to outfielders.
Right.
So if you wanted to take your left fielder and put him in shallow right field, where your infielder used to be, your shifted infielder, and if you want to leave left field completely empty and dare the guy to hit it that way, you can do that. And so Schwarber wouldn't be surprised if somebody tries that. And he said, look, in that case, I'll take a shot to left field, and try to hit an inside the park home run.
I imagine he would.
Honestly, Major League Baseball would love to see that happen. Why? Because it would put action on the bases. So, teams are going to try to be inventive about how they play defense now without the shift, and that's okay. And then, if they get too good at it, I'm sure MLB will figure out a way to legislate against that too. So, look, I think these are all good things, assuming they do what they're intended to do, which is to get things moving and make things more exciting.
I was thinking about the Phil's really exciting postseason run, which nobody expected and was just a lot of joy for all of us. And before they got their face torn off by the Houston Astros, but I recall that there were both amazing home runs. The inside the park home run by JT Realmuto is a thing of beauty, and of course Bryce Harper's home run late in the game against San Diego, which in a way got them to the series in the first place. But there were also a lot of built runs, a lot of cooperative runs where there was more than one hit involved, and I thought that those were just as interesting. I think we beat the Atlanta Braves on a single to the opposite field late in the game when where there were two men on. And I just think that kind of thing is exciting too. It's a different kind of excitement, but all I'm saying is that the Phillies showed that they could do it both ways if they have to. It's not just pummeling the ball into submission, although they have two guys who definitely could do that, three guys.
No doubt. And that's a great point, John, because, I think back to game one of the wild card series in St. Louis, the ninth inning comeback, which without that, I don't know if the Phillies have the month of October and early November that they had, not only because they would have been down 1-0 in that series, but it kind of set the tone for everything that came after, right? I mean, this scrappy team that wasn't done until they were 27 outs recorded in a game. And, and that rally was entirely built on action on the bases and manufacturing a run, and Gene Segura with a big hit through the right side. And
that was amazing. His hit
absolutely
was, the clutch hit it's hard to describe sort of what a clutch hit feels like to watch, because you're already sort of feeling the same pressure the batter is, and then the batter comes through and there's this feeling of relief and surprise and admiration. It's an interesting complex of emotions, the clutch hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's a way, you can, nowadays in baseball in particular and sports in general, there are ways to measure everything, right?
Yeah.
So there are ways to measure clutch hits, late game hits. And I believe two of the three, quote unquote, clutchest hits in Phillies history are now the Harper homer against the Padres that won the pennant, and the Segura hit that won that Cardinals game. And then the third would be the double by Jimmy Rollins in 2009 in the NLCS that beat the Dodgers. So, only one of those three is a home run. The Harper one is a moment that we'll all remember. Everyone's going to remember the inside the park home run by Real Muto. Everyone's going to remember the bat spike by Rhys Hoskins, the homer that Schwarber hit in San Diego that landed somewhere in Tijuana. Everyone's going to remember all of those. But, the Segura hit is as big as any, and it was he punched the ball through the right side, and it was nothing that's gonna, there was not the exit velocity and the distance were not going to break any records, but that was exciting baseball, and that was an exciting ninth inning. And I think years from now, when you talk about the Phillies run in 2022, you'll talk about that ninth inning in St. Louis right up there with everything else.
Let's talk about the bigger bases. How's that supposed to help things, Scott?
Honestly, I think the enlarging of the bases was done in part because I think it's somewhat of a player safety issue. They wanted to make it a little bit safer for players when they slide into bases. It does cut down a little bit on the distance between the bases. So we grew up knowing that there were 90 feet between the bases. Well, now it's like 89 feet and 3/4 inches or something like that. It's slightly shorter. I was talking to Trey Turner, the Phillies' new shortstop, who is probably the fastest runner in the game. And I asked him if he thought it was going to make a difference. And he said, I don't think so. You're still going to be out by a few inches, safe by a few inches on some of those bang bang plays. And it's not like they altered the distance so much that it's really going to advantage certain guys and make things harder. The whole idea, though, is to get people to want to run, teams to want to run more. So in part, what they've done is they've limited the number of times pitcher can throw can have a pickoff throw. So now if you throw over twice, that's it. If you throw over a third time, you either have to get him or he gets second base. So, now what we're seeing in spring training is guy picks over there twice. The runner's probably going to take off. The runner's probably going to go after the second one because he knows if they throw over again, they have to get him. So, you still have to be confident that you're going to make it, or you're still going to have to be confident that you're not going to get picked off. But it is going to be interesting to see whether it incentivizes teams to run a little bit more. And that's part of all of this is just action and to make things a little bit more just less, a little bit less static, I guess, a little bit less standing around, less time between pitches. Theo Epstein, former GM of the Red Sox and Cubs, spearheaded a lot of this for Major League Baseball. And it's ironic because Theo Epstein has a lot to do with, enacting some of the changes in the game that made the game less watchable. And he, he's talked about that and talked about how, he realizes that, the game has to change. And so, he's responsible for, coming up with a lot of these ideas or at least, kind of like, leading the team that has come up with a lot of these ideas. And, he talks about it all the time that, there was the average time between balls in play last year, I think was longer than it had ever been before. And that is also not a sustainable way to attract a new generation of fans that is glued to their iPhones and have shorter attention spans and whatnot. So my son is 6. I would love for my son to love baseball, but I know if the game does not get quicker, his generation is not going to like the game. They're not going to like the sport, and they're going to gravitate to other things. So baseball knew they had to change. Baseball knew they had to adapt, and I think this is a major step in trying to get that to happen.
Yeah, I think baseball seemed to be the classic lazy summer game, but this seems to be a way to push Major League Baseball into major league sports, everybody likes basketball because it's so fast moving. Everybody likes football because the thing is just very physical. And this seems to put baseball on a level with the other sports doing that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Don. And I think, look, I guess there's something to be said for sitting in the ballpark on a summer day with, friends, and you don't have a care in the world, without anything to do or anywhere to go. And you don't mind that slow pace, and you don't mind that cat and mouse game between the pitcher and the batter. And you want the game to last all day. Like, I remember being a kid and going to games, and you want to be there all afternoon. You don't want to go home. But I think that the world has changed. And I think that even folks now, I sit there in the press box, and I can see people in the section right next to me, and other sections, they're on their phones, and they're walking around, going to concession stands. And, I'm not sure that unless like Bryce Harper's at bat, that there's a, can't miss at bat anymore. And, you kind of know that, like, if you don't pay attention for a while and you look back again, that you're probably not going to have missed much. And, this, like I said, this generation, the younger generation, and this world in general, that's probably like a thing of the past. And not everyone's at the ballpark either, enjoying that beautiful sunny day. And, you have other things you can do now. If you're at the shore, you could listen to a podcast instead of listening to the ball game on the radio, or you have to do something to attract a new generation of fans and to get them hooked on the game. And, it's not as simple as it used to be. Lots more for your entertainment dollar than there used to be. So I think baseball is smart, and I think it's long overdue that they get with the program here and try to figure out ways to make the game more interactive, more a little bit quicker. And like I said, it's not the NFL. Like, it's a different product. They're asking you for so much more of your time. It's not even fair to compare baseball or any sport to the NFL, because they're asking you in the NFL for 3 hours of your day on a Sunday, and that's it. And, people make an event out of it, whether they tailgate or they get together with friends and family. Baseball is not an event sport. Like I said, it's kind of the sport you pick up and take with you wherever you're going. And I think even if that's how you consume it, they can make the game more exciting and a little bit faster and a little bit less time consuming, so that you can kind of take it with you and you don't have to have it with you all the time, constantly all the time.
We'll return to our talk with Scott Lauber in just a moment, but first, this soothing musical interlude.
Scott graduated with a degree in journalism from Boston University. He then worked as a sports reporter for newspapers in Concord, New Hampshire, and Binghamton, New York. In Binghamton, he won an Associated Press Sports Editors Award for breaking news and another award for a column he wrote.
Scott first covered the Phillies for a newspaper group in Delaware, then moved on to cover the Red Sox from 2010 to 2018. In 2018, he returned to covering the Phillies, this time for the Inquirer. He's written 2 books about the Phillies: Phillies Confidential, the untold inside story of their 2008 championship, and The Big 50, the men and moments that made the Philadelphia Phillies.
You can read Scott's stories at inquirer.com/author/Scott_Lauber, Lauber. And you can follow him on Twitter at Scott Lauber.
And now back to the musical Innertube, already in progress.
I know it's just the beginning of spring training, but what are you seeing on the field with the Phillies that is interesting?
So what I'm really interested in, John, is just sort of the atmosphere and the energy around the team this spring. I've been back in Philadelphia since 2018. I was lucky to cover the Phillies kind of in their heyday of 07, 08, 09. And I remember what it was like then. What I came back to in 2018 was very different. As you guys know, they had been very bad for quite some time. And the last few years, 2019, 20, and 21 in particular, they missed the playoffs barely. And there was this cloud hanging over them, whether they chose to admit it or not. Like we talked about the drought, the playoff drought, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. Every year they'd come to spring training and people like me would ask them about the drought What do you have to do to break the drought? What do you have to do to break through, get through into October? And last year they broke through, they got into October, they went on a run, they got to the World Series, and they no longer have to talk about the drought. They no longer have to talk about what do you have to do to get over the hump. And it was a weight that was lifted, and it's very, very tangible here in spring training. The mood is a lot different than it has been in recent years. I wouldn't say that like it was tense or that there was, that there was this overriding pressure on them, but there was this, like I said, this sort of backdrop of the team that couldn't get it right in the end, and now they sort of know what it takes to get there. They've done it. People are I think fans sort of believe in this group a little bit more now than they did before. They believe in themselves a little bit more now than they did before. It's mostly the same team back, plus Trey Turner, who is, if not the best shortstop in the game, he's one of the top 2 or 3. So they might be better now than they were last year, and they're going to have to stay healthy. I mean, we're talking here on Friday evening, and they got some troubling news today about their 19-year-old pitcher, Andrew Painter. He's got a bit of a tender elbow, and they sent him for tests today, and they're hoping that that it's just something easy like inflammation or something that, doesn't linger. But, they have to stay healthy, and they have to have some luck on their side, but they also know they're good. They know they're talented, and they know their way now to get through to October. And I think that sort of changed the atmosphere and the energy a little bit around the team and around this camp. There also aren't very many jobs up for grabs. It's rare that you come into a camp, even on good teams, and like 24 of the 26 roster spots basically are accounted for. That's the case here. So, a lot of the focus is get out of spring training healthy, get out of spring training with your roster intact, and off you go.
I think also in looking around baseball, Scott, during the off season, there was some minor shuffling. Everybody seems to have solidified their positions, and there doesn't seem to be any team that stocked up any more than any other team. And for example, I'm looking at these projections for this year, and the Phillies, although they did kind of sneak into the World Series, they got hot at the last minute. Still, for this year, they're still predicted to be third in the league behind the Mets and the Braves. So is there a feeling around baseball that everything is kind of going to be this year what it was last year, that the teams are pretty much in that same position?
I don't know. I mean, I would agree with you that the good teams last year are, for the most part, going to be the good teams this year. And that's a problem for baseball in some ways, because I always used to think one of the cool things about spring training was, 30 teams would go to camp, and the large majority of them would at least have some hope that they could get into the postseason. I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, you can't go to Oakland A's camp and tell me that they're excited about the year ahead, or Colorado Rockies camp. Those are not going to be good teams, and no one thought they would be good teams. They can't possibly think they're going to be good. With the Phillies, it's interesting. I had a sit-down interview the first full day of spring training with John Middleton, who's the owner. And he sort of got this, he kind of outlined this vision that he has, and it's ambitious and probably unrealistic, but that 100 years from now, when they talk about the great teams in baseball history, they'll talk about this vintage of the Phillies. And he knows it's an ambitious goal. He knows they may not achieve it. I mean, to be one of the best teams in baseball history, you've got to win multiple World Series. It's hard. There's a reason why the 27 Yankees are the 27 Yankees, right? And the Big Red Machine in the 70s is the Big Red Machine. These types of dynasties don't come around all the time. But what he's done is he's put his money where his ambition is, and he's put together a team with a record payroll that's going to be in luxury tax territory for a second consecutive year. He's going to spend, before the tax, upwards of $250 million on the payroll. And they've got a chance to be good, and they've got a chance to win. It has not been lost on them, Don, that they are being picked by a lot of people to finish third. They're well aware of that. I think that, how athletes are. They like to use anything they possibly can as motivation, and I think that's something that that they'll use in a positive way. I made that similar statement that you just made to John Middleton about the Phillies getting hot at the right time last year. And he politely made the point back to me that from June 1st on last year, they had, there was a 1-game difference in the standings between the Phillies and the Mets, who of course won 101 games. So the Phillies view themselves as not an 87-win team like they were last year. They think they're better than that. We'll see. They do play in a super tough division. The Mets and Braves both won 101 games last year, and both of them are just as good today as they were when the season ended last year, I think. So the top of the NL East is going to be tough. But, the Phillies think that they're in that mix. I think the NL East, to your point, is the same 3 teams. I think the San Diego Padres probably think that they have a chance to knock the Dodgers off in the West. I think there are some teams in the Central in both leagues, like the Cubs in the National League, probably the Indians in the Guardians, in the American League, that think that that they stand a chance to win their divisions. The Cubs, of course, did not win their division last year. The Guardians did win theirs. So there are some teams that think that they're maybe in the mix for a playoff spot that weren't in the mix last year. But you're right. For the most part, the good teams are the good teams, and the bad teams are the bad teams. One of the other interesting wrinkles this year is that everyone will play everyone. So you will play all 29 teams. In fact, I think the Phillies have something like 18 of their first 30 against the American League, which is unique. They play fewer games against their division. They will not be upset about playing fewer games against the Mets and Braves. They will miss beating up on the Nationals. But yeah, it's going to look a little different this year, and maybe the balanced schedule gives some other teams more of a chance than they would have had before. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But, I think you kind of know mostly who the good teams are going to be, and there are probably going to be some teams on the outside looking in at the end who thought they were pretty good, and they underachieved. It's how it always happens.
I mean, it's the kind of division, I'm talking about the National League East now, where you can win 99 games and come into third.
Yeah.
And you might be in a good wild card situation. It might be the same thing again. I must say, Scott, listening to you talk about this, I can't wait for the season to start.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, man, when the games start meaning something, we're really gonna see whether these changes make a difference, just in the way it feels out there, which, it probably will.
My sense is that it will. My sense is that you're certainly going to notice the time of game. That's something I have noticed, and as I said, been very happy with. Look, Alex Cora, the manager of the Red Sox, the Phillies were in Fort Myers earlier this week. He made a comment like, "Who doesn't like the pitch clock? You're going to get home earlier." And I think that's ultimately what it's all about, right? Like, you give enough hours as a baseball fan to the game because that's what you have to do to follow the game, and they're giving you a little bit of a break, and they're going to make it a little easier on you to love the sport, and that's ultimately what they want.
Hey, well, Scott, thanks very much for being with us today and for talking about some of these changes and for talking about our Phils, who look like they're in a pretty good situation for this year. So thanks for being with us. Enjoy the games, man. You're down there in Florida in the nice weather watching baseball every day and getting paid for it. What a deal.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. All right. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Scott.
Stay cool.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
The Musical Innertube is available everywhere good podcasts are found. Listen on your favorite platform and give us a good rating.
You can subscribe to the podcast on our website, musicalinnertube.com.
There you can listen to all of our podcasts, see pictures and biographies of our guests, and contact us. You can even leave us a voicemail.
And don't forget to leave your email address on our Talk to the Two page on the website, and we'll send you a preview of who's coming to talk with us by email, just so you're prepared.
That's musicalinnertube.com.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.